Well, we're sitting in stage 4 load shedding this evening once again, and one lesson learnt from the Eskom energy supply crisis is that we cannot afford to ignore warnings about dwindling resources and the impact of not planning ahead. Of course, last week's gas explosion in Johannesburg, which could have been caused by a build-up of methane gas, may ultimately also point to neglect. We'll have to wait to hear from that report. So the news then that by 2030, less than 7 years away, we will have a water supply deficit of 17% is really worrying. The National Water and Sanitation Master Plan has projected this shortfall in water supply. Not only must we as citizens reduce our own individual water consumption, it's estimated that 1 trillion rand will be needed to make sure we use water wisely. Let's discuss this now with Rudie Opperman, Manager for Engineering and Training in the Middle East and Africa with Access Communications. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. You know, you watch what happened in Johannesburg. Of course, we don't know if neglect had any part to play in it at this point, but it has certainly brought to mind again the importance of doing things in time, making sure that we heed these warnings. Just as Eskom was warned that they would be, or Eskom rather tried to warn government that they would run out of power and not have enough power. That's why we're in the crisis we are. Tell me then why we're going to be facing this projected 17% shortfall in water by 2030.
I mean, to be honest, if one thinks about it, this is a very complex issue. Of course, there's lots of issues, not just one. But I think one has to look at what are we doing with what we currently have already. If you think about the way that these critical infrastructure facilities, what's the state of them? I mean, and we can only go by the reports that we see. If you read the reports, one can see that there's things like neglect, vandalism and theft, of course, breakdown of certain systems. So it's not one problem, it's many problems. But what we are coming from a position to say that, you know, there are smart technologies that can be used in a very good way to monitor the processes, to help protect the investment in these facilities, so that we can maximize the output of what we already have.
Yeah, we are a water scarce country. We've known that for a long time, and yet we consume way more water individually than other countries. What has gone wrong in South Africa that we as residents are not mindful of that, do you think?
I mean, I can only give my opinion. I can imagine that definitely it starts with awareness, creating awareness already at a young age, you know, in schools. What we have seen in other places that we're also involved in is where they have competitions for kids to innovate, to come up with ideas and see how what innovation we can use to conserve water as well. And this is quite interesting once you see what kids can come up with. So I think awareness starting at a young age, of course, then this is something that we can build towards the future so we don't have this problem in the future.
Yeah. So this estimate, this comes from the National Water and Sanitation Master Plan, that by 2030 we're going to be short of water to the tune of 17%. If you look at what needs to be done, I would imagine just as the problem comes from many different areas, so the solution is. I know that, you know, you mentioned smart tech, but I think it's also basic stuff like repairing leaky pipes, fixing broken infrastructure, the education on water consumption you've mentioned. But what needs to be done in the next 7 years to make sure we're not facing a water crisis?
I mean, the point you made, of course, people, if they see a leaking tap, if they see maybe a burst pipe, report it immediately. I mean, those are easy things that everybody can do. But also, I mean, I read somewhere in the report that there was a figure of 151 of these facilities were surveyed over a period of 2 to 3 months. So my mind goes towards if it takes an expert, let's say an inspector, 3 months to go to 151 of these facilities, just to see what the problem is, just to do an audit. I can imagine if we find a better way to monitor these processes and these facilities, so not only protect them, but also monitor them and give these decision makers the ability to monitor this from a central location, then they can very easily assess what the problem is, and they can also then spend more time focusing on the problematic areas. So, that's just another gain that becomes easily visible.
So what are some of the smart tech solutions that might actually help us? Because, we cannot ignore technology. We aren't even getting the basics right. But at the same time, technology can sometimes help us fix what has been broken.
Yes, absolutely. So, of course, technology I'm referring to is where we have known devices like, let's say, surveillance cameras. But what we see these days with AI and the deep learning capability are on the device itself. We give it intelligence and we give it decision-making power. So when you have these smart surveillance systems that are integrated with the existing automation systems that are running at these plants, you can then monitor and verify the certain stages within the process. Another example could be if you have a perimeter and you want to keep unauthorized people outside. You can use this smart technology to detect people and give early warning to try and prevent theft and vandalism. And then also where people and cars move, one can also use the access control systems to also confirm and monitor processes. As people move around through a facility, one can then audit that. So it's not just keeping the bad guys out, so to say, it's also monitoring what is happening inside a process, and therefore ensuring that the quality is there and the monitoring that needs to happen is taken care of.
Give me an example of how that specifically would help deal with this looming water shortage. Just talk me through a practical example.
So, of course, apart from the unaccounted water and the wastage that we spoke about, if we just say that there are facilities that are working, some better than others. So on the one hand, you can make sure that we keep these working at a high level, but then there are many of them that are not working. So using smart technology to up the level of production.
How?
To make sure that there's not...
So talk me through that. Give me some really practical... I want to see how the smart tech can work to help with water, because I'm not seeing it currently.
Okay, great. So let's say there's chemicals that needs to be used to purify water. So of course these chemicals needs to be stored in certain locations. So one can make sure that you keep the inventory with an automated system of the chemicals, so that you don't run out. So that could give an early warning that we need to replenish the chemicals. So that's one area. It could also be that where they purify the water. So if you monitor certain processes visibly with surveillance cameras, with analytics running on it to monitor and look for a specific thing within the video, to try and create what we call metadata, so that we can see what is the camera actually looking at. So we can then use that to maybe predict or maybe alarm on certain conditions. So it could be the water color, for instance, is not the way that we expect it. Now, it doesn't make sense if you think about one, but imagine if you have 1,000 facilities where you have this technology monitoring all of them at the same time, and only letting us know about the exceptions, and only letting us know about where there are problems and flagging it very early. So then the authorities and the decision makers can very easily focus their efforts towards where it's needed, and not spend all the time just auditing and finding out what the problem is.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But I suppose it would cost a lot of money. I'm seeing estimates that we need R1 trillion to sort out our water problems.
Of course, if you just think about the maintenance and the existing infrastructure that there is, of course, that costs money. So on the one hand, if you protect what you already have, so against vandalism and theft, that is a little bit of saving over time. And then also making sure that something that's installed is in a working condition, that could also be verified and monitored by smart technology. So I think the investment will also work better. So you can also, in some circumstances, you can actually save money over time. So fix something or prevent something to go wrong before it actually costs money.
Yeah, stitch in time saves 9. Of course, these stats come from the National Water and Sanitation Master Plan, which says that by 2030 we are facing a 17% deficit in water. The fact that these stats have come from government, Is government on board, actively engaging with what are we going to do? Is there a sense of urgency? Are you picking that up, that there is a sense that government knows that this is the next big challenge that has to be tackled?
I mean, I don't think I'm in a position to comment on that. I can only give my opinion. Of course, if I look at the report that's come out and the statements that's been made, it certainly looks like there are some, at least, that are taking this very serious. But I think definitely this will be an effort by many different stakeholders and decision makers. So definitely need more urgency, and we need even more awareness to be created.
Absolutely. We need to keep talking about solutions and not leave it until the 11th hour. Thank you so much for chatting to us, Rudie Opperman.